Let's move on now to tables, and these are probably the hardest thing about LaTeX. So here's an example of a table, and I'll get that table here on the PDF side. So again, we just begin our table and say either put it here at the bottom or the top of this page if you can, and then we have a caption for this table, and it's centered. And then here at the begin the table, the first thing we do is we tell it how many columns we want in our table, and then the justification. So the letters in here are either going to be an L, a C, or an R. And so L means left justified, C means center. So what this means is that I have a left justified column, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 center justified columns. And you can see that the very first column over here is left justified, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 center justified columns. So that line determines how many columns you have and how justified they are. The number of rows is just determined by how many rows you put in. So this little H line here is not necessary, it just draws a line. And so everywhere you see an H line, you will see that means horizontal line, and you will see a horizontal line in the table. So you can separate your rows by lines if you'd like, or just separate your heading from all the other rows like they've done here. They've done something fancy here where they made a multi-column row, and that's how they put this transition in a row by itself, and it's over top of a couple of columns. And I'm not going to get into how they did that, so I'm just going to delete it to prevent us from getting confused by it. But you can look up how to make a multi-column row on Google if you'd like to. And so now we just have headers separated by data using that horizontal line command. And so now to make different rows, you just add rows and then separate them by double slashes. So if when I want to put in my first row, I put in what I want in my very first column, and then the command and then I put in what I want in my second column, followed by the command and. So you can see I have the word line in my first column, and then a new in my second column, and then you'll notice there's nothing between these two ands here, and there is no header on this column, and so forth. And so you can see that I have 7 total columns, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it comes down to the second one, 7, 8 entries here. Let's see, how many columns am I supposed to have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 entries here. Okay, so it took me a little while to find those, but I have 7 entries each separated by ands. And then at the end of my last entry, I have a double backslash, and that tells it to make a new row. And then after my double backslash, I have a backslash line, and that tells it to make a line. So then on my next one, I have again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 entries, and just a double backslash with no H line, and so you can see it made a new row, but it didn't separate it by a line. And so you just keep making those for as many rows as you'd like. Now, presumably, I'm going to take this example and then make my own table from it. So, for example, if I wanted to change this table to have one less column, all I would need to do is come up here, get rid of one of the columns, and then I would need to delete the very last entry in each row. And hopefully, if I've been careful about this, that should make the same table with one less column. And it does. Cool. So now what I would do is I would go back and I would enter all of my data and my heading titles in here, and I would have a table. That is very arduous. It's probably the worst part of LaTeX. Yes, it's easier in Microsoft Word, but the formatting and the professional look of the resulting PDF in LaTeX makes it worth it, in my opinion.